There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's Whispers mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. Maybe tonight you're searching for that gentle doorway into sleep, or craving a kind of peace that doesn't end when you wake up. Maybe you felt life moving a little too fast, the world a little too loud, or maybe there's just a quiet ache, an emptiness you can't quite name, following you from room to room. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong to the moment? Like your heart was reaching out for something softer, something lighter, but you weren't sure what? Maybe there was a time when the world felt too heavy, or a silence pressed in so deeply you wondered if anyone could really understand. That's exactly what Rumi's Whispers mystical poetry for rest once felt too. Stay with me tonight, not in the past, but right here. Let's step together into the quiet space just before dream, where story becomes sensation, and sensation becomes your own breath, where Rumi is not a distant poet, but a companion walking gently beside you in the dark. The invitation isn't to remember perfectly, but to remember gently. Ask just for a little permission to soften your gaze, to let your breath come easier, to let yourself be seen. Some stories are lanterns. This one is more like a window that opens quietly in your own soul. So as the night settles around you, let's surrender to the rhythm of a life lived, not just seeking that light, but becoming it. Peer beyond the words, and you'll find a mirror reflecting your own secret longing. Let the hush between each breath be a space where something sacred can rise in you again. You're not alone in the dark. You're just arriving. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's Whispers mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt the world slow down in the middle of a busy day just for a moment? Maybe your heart caught a phrase from somewhere, a scrap of poetry, or the way sunlight pooled onto the floor, and you felt different, almost as if an invisible hand traced a gentle circle in your spirit, then sat beside you, saying nothing until everything softened. Maybe there was a time when you looked at the night sky and felt both completely here and somehow missing, like you were waiting for a memory just out of reach. Maybe you've wondered if there's more to waking up than simply opening your eyes. That's exactly what Rumi's Whispers mystical poetry for rest once felt too. Because to whisper is to trust, to give yourself over to what can't be rushed or explained. Rumi's life was a long, slow letting go of what he knew, what he owned, even what he thought was his own voice. He spoke in the language of longing. You can almost hear it between his lines, that ache to get closer to the center, Not the center of the world, but the place inside each breath where the world disappears. Tonight, I'll sit quietly beside you, not to teach, but to travel together. With every word, let the world grow softer. Let the day fall behind you. Let your breath find a rhythm that feels gentle, like water lapping at the edge of a sleeping lake. This isn't about learning who Rumi was, but remembering who you are when everything else quiets down. In the hush of this hour, you're invited to be both the listener and the one being listened to, the story and the center it stirs. If you've wandered or wondered or felt the edge of something beautiful just beyond your reach, you're right on time. Because stories that survive the centuries aren't woven from facts, but from the longing to return home, to peace, to clarity, to the still purpose behind all the motion. Tonight, come home as you are, whispering yourself back to the heart that is always, always listening. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. It's late. Maybe your head's just found the pillow. There's a little ache in your body that sighs with the weight of another day. You're here with me, not for a story about someone distant and wise, but for something quieter, something closer. Tonight on the Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's whispers, mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt the pull of something that words can't quite describe? The ache for a kind of comfort your mind can't explain? Maybe there was a moment, alone in a silent room or walking beneath the bare sky, when you wished for something more than answers. You wished for a kind of homecoming, an arrival within yourself. That's exactly what Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest once felt too. It's funny how a name can hide the flicker of a soul, because Rumi wasn't just a poet or a thinker or even just a mystic. He was a question longing for an answer, a breath looking for its rhythm, a seeker just like us, standing at the edge of the world and listening for the quiet music within. Maybe tonight you're hoping for a little relief from the thoughts that loop and wander. Maybe you're craving something softer than certainty. Or maybe you're just tired and you want to hear a voice that knows the way, even in the dark. I want to offer you more than a story. I want to give you a companion, a presence that won't hurry you to meaning, that won't ask you to believe in anything except the chance that, within all this longing, there is already a kind of peace ready for you. So, take a breath with me. Let it come slow. Let it fill your body and soften the hard edges of the day. We're traveling together, not back in time, but into a kind of waking dream, where the life of Rumi is not written in dusty pages, but breathed into the hush of this very moment. All the while, remember, nothing here is meant to impress your mind, but to rest your heart. This isn't a lesson. It's not about getting it right. It's about trusting the gentle urge deep inside you, the part that knows, somehow, being alive is still mysterious, still beautiful, even when it hurts. If you've ever felt alone in your searching, you're not alone tonight. Rumi knew that kind of aloneness too. His words, his whispers, have floated through centuries, not because they held cleverness, but because they somehow understood what it means to long, to grieve, to lose, and maybe most quietly, to discover a light you forgot was there. Whatever you came here carrying, just place it on the floor beside you now. For the next 90 minutes, let's travel together into the rhythm of Rumi's life, not as a mystic you have to understand, but as a soul learning to rest, just like you. No pressure, no rush, only presence, only breath, only the possibility that something soft is waiting within every word. Let's begin. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Maybe you felt the weight of longing late at night, the hum of questions that never seem to settle, no matter how many answers you chase. Have you ever laid still, your heart echoing with a gentle ache, wanting something more, but not knowing the shape of it? So did he. Maybe there was a time when loss left you emptied out, or when beauty struck so deeply it almost hurt to breathe. The world softens in these moments. We find ourselves alone, but not lonely, because something in the silence starts speaking back. That's exactly what Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest once felt too. Tonight, we're not here to study his life or recite his lines like cold relics of poetry. We're here to listen for the whispers that ripple beneath the surface, the gentle truths he lived, the way he let presence wash over him, the rhythm he discovered in ordinary days. There's no right way to listen. Just let your body soften, your breath slow, and your limbs drift wherever rest pulls you. Let's let the world grow dim for a while. Set down the old story of always knowing and meet the tender space where new wonder is born. What if mysteries didn't have to be solved, but held? What if your rest tonight could be the ground where an ancient seed quietly unfolds? Maybe tonight you'll hear something familiar in his journey, not in the details, but in the pulse that runs underneath every yearning soul. A voice that hums, "You're not alone. You never were." Rumi's whispers aren't magic words. Their breaths falling in the darker, soft hands, inviting you back to what never left. So, as you dissolve into your pillow, let's step gently into the slow, warm night of a life surrendered to wonder, and find the rhythm of your own longing, echoing back in the hush between his words. Stay with me. Let's begin. Once, long before anyone called him by any name that mattered, there was just a boy. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, For purpose, their story may become your own. So get comfortable. Maybe you're lying in bed, or maybe you're settling into the last hour of the night, letting the slow world dim around you. You don't have to try, just be here. Let the day drift farther behind. Let the blanket of this story unfold. Have you ever felt a presence beneath your racing thoughts? Some steady silence that calls, even if the rest of you is busy moving. Maybe there was a time when, in the middle of all you're doing, you paused, just for a breath, and knew you were in touch with something deeper. That's exactly what Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest once felt too. Rumi, whose words drift like wind through ancient trees, whose poems have curled beneath so many pillows, was a restless soul long before he was named a mystic. He lived in a world of change and challenge, chased by uncertainty, but drawn always by the pulse of a deeper music. Not a distant sage, but someone who questioned, who wandered, and sometimes sat stunned in wonder at how lost he felt. We think of mystics as masters, untouchable, glowing, but Rumi's story starts closer to the ground. He knew the ache that keeps you up at night. He knew the restlessness of wanting more. He knew what it was to feel both too small for the universe and somehow weighty with its mystery. As you lie back now, with the night pressing soft against your skin, listen, not for facts, but for the feeling here. Let the words wander with you. If your thoughts come and go, that's all right. This isn't about remembering every line, but about touching a gentler rhythm within yourself. The same quiet rhythm that slowly woke Rumi from fear to flow. You don't need to believe anything special to be here. It's enough just to want rest or healing or a little more of yourself tonight. The world will wait. The story will carry you. If by the end a part of you feels lighter, if you sense a hush blooming under your ribs, that's the real gift. So tonight, come with me. Drift down into Rumi's world, his loves, his aches, his wild moments and stillnesses. Let the story rock you. Let it remind you who you are, beneath everything else. Let's breathe together and begin. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt like you belonged to two worlds at once? Maybe there was a time when the world outside was loud, but something inside called for quiet wonder. That's exactly what Rumi once felt too. You're here, right now, at the doorway between wakefulness and sleep. And in this soft, in-between space, it's easier to remember yourself, easier to slip beneath the surface to where meaning feels simple, where your heart can rest. You don't have to hold anything up tonight. Just listen. Just breathe. We'll walk together into the footsteps of a mystic whose words cradle so many souls. But tonight, it's not about poetry on a page or ancient books or even legends. It's about noticing the way longing moves through a human life, the way silence sometimes swells into song, or a single whisper becomes the heartbeat of a whole world. So, if you've ever woken in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, asking silent questions, if you've ever wanted a peace deeper than words, something you could actually feel, you're not alone. Even someone as luminous as Rumi learned to sit quietly with the ache. Even he needed to lose and find himself over and over. Maybe you grew up watching others move through life, always with certainty, always claiming they knew the path. Maybe you never quite fit into their lines or settled into their rhythms. Or maybe life taught you early that stillness was safer than noise. If so, you're in good company. Because once, long before his name was carved into memory, Rumi was just a child feeling the world push and pull against his senses, just trying to understand the strange weight of being alive. As we begin, I'll keep company with you, not as a teacher, not as a guide, but as someone holding a lantern just bright enough for this one step, and the next, and the next. Tonight, we'll glide through his earliest wonders, moments where longing tasted like air and silence felt like home. Feel the gentle gravity of his first spark, the pain and forgiveness in his sacred struggle. Pause with him at turning points when the world remakes itself in an instant. You'll walk alongside a soul in motion, embodying quiet truths, moving in rhythm with a code older than language. You'll hear the whispered answers of a heart that survived losing, loving, seeking, and finally settling into a deep, nameless peace. If you let yourself drift, if you let the edges soften, you might even feel something shift inside you just a little. No pressure to remember every detail. No need to figure anything out. Just trace the sound of breath. Let the words settle like gentle rain. Rest is here. The story of Rumi, your mirror for this night, begins now. There are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on The Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's whispers, mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt that sense, like something was missing, even when everything around you seemed okay? Maybe there was a time when you looked out at the world and felt the undertow of longing, this hush beneath your skin that wouldn't quite let go. That's exactly what Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest once felt too. This isn't about learning facts or memorizing lines or understanding some distant mystic. It's about finding your rhythm, slowing your breath, and letting something true surface inside you right here as you drift towards sleep. Imagine for a moment your room growing more and more quiet. There's a gentle hush that settles over your body. Your shoulders let go for the first time today. Your heart softens, even if just a little. Something within you remembers. The story we tell tonight isn't about one man. It's about remembering the light in silence, the wisdom that arrives when the world goes still, and letting something in you, something ancient, maybe even eternal, wake up in the deepest rest. I'll be here with you, like a friend guiding you through the dark. We'll breathe together, step by step, letting Rumi's life unfold inside your own. Not rushed, not forced, just an invitation to listen, feel, and find your own space among his whispers. You don't have to believe anything or figure anything out. You just have to rest, soften, let the night do what it does best. If you ever wondered what it would feel like to be met, truly met, by a story that's not trying to fix you or impress you, but simply walk beside you, that's what this is. Rumi's journey isn't special because he was a sage or a poet. It's special because it's honest, human. He knew longing, confusion, grief. He danced with joy, with friendship, with loss. And through it all, he kept choosing presence, the gentle courage to stay awake, even when the world wanted him to sleepwalk. Tonight, as you listen, not to facts, but to a rhythm, you might find that some part of you wants to remember, too. You are not alone here in the dark. Rumi's story was always yours in disguise, so let's begin. There are stories that change your mind, and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on the Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's whispers, mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt some part of you was searching, even when the world looked at ease? Maybe there was a time when nothing in the daylight seemed enough, when restlessness folded into your chest at night, whispering questions you didn't dare ask out loud. That's exactly what Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest once felt too. His journey did not begin on a stage or under a spotlight. It began in ordinary rooms. It began in the hush between his own heartbeats, in the little flickers of confusion and longing that make every life a little mysterious. Imagine being born into a world where expectations press onto your shoulders before you even have words, where your father carries a lantern others expect you to bear. Each step feels watched, each dream measured. Still, in the thrum of daily life, the tender seed of longing began to stir within Rumi, quietly, the way light collects in the corners before dawn. Maybe you felt something like this invisible currents pulling you somewhere deeper, even as the roles of family, school, or work ask you to be simpler, clearer, easier to understand. In Rumi's childhood, these currents weren't loud. They felt like a quiet ache, a space within him that nothing could quite fill. As a little boy, he'd sneak out when the house was silent, just to stand beneath the empty sky. Looking up, breath slow and steady, he'd wonder why the stars seemed to know secrets no one would say out loud. The world was big. The world was strange. Sometimes, when nobody was looking, he'd close his eyes and imagine that something vast was listening back. This longing wasn't a storm. It was a soft, persistent wind. The way your mind wanders when you're washed with longing for something unnamed. For Rumi, it sounded like the hush of a heartbeat. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he almost felt he could hear it whispering. As he grew, so did the tension. The desire to belong, to be what his family and community needed, pressed up against the desire to wander off and disappear into the questions. He played both parts for a while, the dutiful son, the attentive student. He learned the rules of the world, but inside, he wondered what lived beyond all those rules. Who am I? He'd ask in secret when nobody's watching. And maybe that's where you find yourself tonight, hovering on the quiet edge between what the world expects and what your heart keeps returning to. Maybe you've noticed the spark inside you flickering, sometimes quietly, sometimes like a beacon you can't explain to anyone else. If so, you're already walking with Rumi. He carried his longing like a secret lantern. Sometimes it lit his way, sometimes it felt heavy as stone, but always it was there, pressed to his chest, nearly invisible in the daylight, but blazing through him in the dark. You don't have to decide tonight what that longing wants from you. Just notice how it feels in your breath right now, as if a gentle wind is moving through you, making space for something new, just beyond the reach of words. That longing connects you to Rumi and to the quiet brilliance that lives beneath all our stories. So tonight, as your body begins to relax and your breathing slows, know that you are not just drifting into sleep. You are entering the vastness that Rumi once wandered, the same landscape of questions, softness, and surrender. Together, we will follow the thread of longing that runs underneath the noise. It's time to listen, to rest, to let the story make a gentle home in your own hush. He began like you did, with longing for something he could not name. As the story unfolds, let that longing become a guide and a companion. What waits for you in the spaces between the words may awaken what's always been yours, hidden just beneath your breathing. This is not a tale of the past, but a mirror held quietly in the present, offering you back to yourself. As you slip into rest, there are stories that change your mind and stories that change your breath. This one may change how you walk through the world. Tonight on the Modern Mystic, we enter the quiet brilliance of Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest, not as a figure in history, but as a mirror to something sacred inside you. If you've ever longed for peace, for clarity, for purpose, their story may become your own. Have you ever felt the world move a little too fast? Like the noise outside drowns out your softest thought. Maybe there was a time when you woke up in the night, searching for a feeling you couldn't name. Or you looked out the window and wished the world could be just a little softer. If you've ever wanted a life that feels like coming home, this is a night for you. That's exactly what Rumi's whispers mystical poetry for rest once felt too. Close your eyes if you want. Set the phone down, let the world slip from your hands. Right now, there is nothing you need to fix or solve in this hour. We're not learning, we're remembering. Rumi was many things, a poet, a mystic, a teacher. But tonight, they are simply a presence. Not just words on a page or a whisper from the past, but a gentle guide, close enough to feel the hush in your chest. Picture the world as it once was, dusty roads, warm winds, the sense that the skies themselves could listen. Rumi was born into this space of wandering and wonder. There were questions he carried even as a child, secrets he tucked away in the folds of his thoughts, the kind of longing that isn't made of words, but of a breath you're waiting to take. Maybe you know that feeling too. Maybe there's a part of you that has never stopped searching. A small, familiar ache right under the surface. The feeling of wanting to be understood, to be seen, to find a peace big enough to hold you. As you listen, let Rumi's journey be your own. With every story, every silence, a gentle memory of something ancient in you wakes up. You don't need to know Persian or study poetry to walk beside them. You just need to breathe. Tonight, Rumi is not a person from the past. They are the part of you that wants more softness in the world, more reason to trust the quiet. Their poetry, these whispered lines and gentle teachings, calls you back to a hidden place you may have forgotten, but have never lost. Through Rumi's story, maybe we'll find a safe space, not to escape, but to rest, to listen for the pulse under ordinary things, the promise that even in our most restless nights, a deeper peace is possible, that a different kind of knowing exists just outside the edge of sleep. And so, as this soul biography unfolds, settle in. The outside world will wait. Your only task is to listen, to feel, and to let the story wrap softly around you. The story that waits for you now runs on breath and begins in longing, and each moment to come is just a gentle invitation back to yourself. Rumi entered the world surrounded by movement. His family wandered, his childhood traced through faraway cities. He learned to trust in what didn't change, the steady rhythm of his own heart, the softness at his mother's side. His father's voice, deep and sure, carrying stories of things that lived beyond sight. He heard music, not just from instruments, but running quietly behind every conversation, every silence. When the dusk fell and the lamps glowed, something in him would listen deeper than ears, like the hush before sleep or the space between thoughts. Maybe you remember a childhood moment like that, when the world seemed both enormous and right there, holding you. For Rumi, it was there in the flicker of stars, the sweep of caravan shadows, the glances between people who understood that most things worth loving can't be explained. Still, there was longing, a sense that he was only ever halfway home, as though his life were a question waiting for an answer. Sometimes he walked alone behind the others, finding comfort in the rhythm of his steps. Sometimes he sat beside a quiet field, feeling the world go on without him, aware of his own smallness, and somehow glad for it. He was always gentle. His voice was calm, his laughter easy, but it held a core of quiet concern, a wish to understand what bound people together, what spark made a soul feel real. As the family crossed borders, evaded conflict, settled and uprooted, Rumi learned to accept not knowing. He found calm among changes. It became a practice in itself, one he would later give away through poetry, teaching, presence. Even as a boy, Rumi felt the ache of things ending, the nostalgia for homes he'd barely known, the grief for stories lost in translation. These weren't burdens, They gave him a gravity, a kindness, a way of seeing others not as strangers but as fellow wanderers, each holding their own silent longing. You might know that ache too, the feeling that you're always almost home, the urge to reach for something just outside your grasp. In Rumi's life, that longing was his quiet companion. He didn't rush to outgrow it. Instead, he let it refine his senses, soften his judgments, open his heart to possibilities. At dusk, when the family would rest near the fireside, sharing bread and small joys, Rumi learned to fall in love with the ordinary. It was never just the story or the teaching, but the gentle tone in his mother's voice, the breath in the air, the slow return to stillness after a day's journey. Long before he became a voice echoed by millions, he was just a boy with a question. What does it take to feel truly at peace? That question is where the story stays. Tonight, let that question soften inside you, too. Rumi's longing didn't stay silent forever. There was a moment, a quiet pivot, when stillness cracked open and something stirred. He didn't know it was happening at first. All he felt was an unfamiliar warmth, almost like the first day of spring, showing up in the middle of winter. One dusk, Rumi wandered beyond the edge of their camp. Clouds drifted low, and the field hummed with the slow breath of evening. As he moved, he heard a sound, a single note, maybe a reed flute or a distant bell. It stopped him. In that moment, everything felt simple. The world seemed ordinary and extraordinary all at once. There was a gentle excitement, like discovering an old friend sitting quietly in your room. As the note faded, something inside him woke up. The longing that once stung became a kind of pulse, a silent invitation. He listened hard, not for more music, but for what might be making the world itself sing. Had you ever felt your whole chest open at a sound, a sunset, the hush after rain? It was like that. A first spark, bright but kind. He returned to his father's side, carrying something he couldn't name. In the quiet that followed, he watched the people around him. They all seemed lit from within, held together by a gentle current. Rumi felt sure that the love he longed for was already here, not in answers, but in presence. In the days that followed, he found himself pausing more often, breathing deeper, wondering if maybe every longing is a kind of remembering, that all searching is just the soul's way of calling itself back home. Over time, that first spark became his quiet guide. He noticed moments that belonged only to him, his mother humming as she wove cloth, his teacher's hand guiding his own, a merchant pausing in kindness rather than hurry. These fragments, as simple as breath, were the jet fuel for his later poetry. He'd watch others, their worries, the way they reached for each other without words. He started to feel their longing too. In his silent way, Rumi became a place for stories to land, for people to find their own spark reflected back. He didn't speak of it. He just let the new warmth live quietly, a steady flame against the world's cold. The longing didn't disappear, but now it moved alongside the spark. Each one magnified the other, turning pain into invitation, silence into song. Maybe tonight you can sense a similar spark, small, calm, but persistent, not a loud breakthrough or sudden epiphany, just a kindling inside, waiting for you to notice. For Rumi, that was the beginning of everything, the first gentle fire, the first yes to a life built on wonder. And so the journey opened, not in grand gestures, but in the hush under ordinary things. But every soul story meets struggle. The longing and the spark didn't erase life's hardship, they deepened it. There were years when even Rumi's breath felt heavy, when the world's sorrow seemed too much to carry. He tasted loss early. Wars broke out, and his family moved again and again. Home became less a place and more a feeling to search for. There were nights of hunger, days of confusion, old friends left behind, and always the silent question, why must love and loss travel together? You've probably felt that too. That small ache you carry through your own changes, the sense that nothing is ever completely safe or certain. Rumi learned to grieve softly. He didn't rush. Sometimes he would sit alone, letting the sadness run through him without trying to lift it. He saw his family bear their pain, his father's quiet worry, his mother's tired hands. That honesty made him tender, but never brittle. He let sadness become part of his breath, not something to push away. He started to notice how others struggled, too. Old men at the marketplace, younger children scared by thunder, women praying for lost sons. He watched as they found small comforts, a shared meal, or a hand pressed quietly to the heart. Life's hardships didn't harden him, they slowed him down, made him more able to listen. There were days Rumi doubted everything. He wondered if his longing was just foolishness, if peace was too rare to find. On those days, he stopped seeking answers. He learned to just be, to sit in the dark, letting the ache become a kind of companion. The kindness he developed for himself became a beacon for others. He listened to others in a way that made them feel less alone. Being present, even in struggle, it was its own quiet mastery. He lived with his questions like you might carry a stone in your pocket, touching them, weighing them, letting their edges grow smooth over time. More than answers, what he found was a deeper ability to be still, to sense the hidden holiness in ordinary discomfort. Hardship became the loom for his later poetry. But in these early days, it was simply the rhythm of life. Pain, breath, healing, repeated, never rushed. In Rumi's eyes, struggle wasn't a sign of failure, but a raw proof of being alive. It was, in its own way, the pulse under the silence. You may carry your own struggles right now. Let them exist as part of your story, as Rumi let his. No need to fix or rush. Sometimes just breathing with the pain is the highest wisdom. Rumi lived that quietly before he ever wrote it down. Out of that hush, a turning point waited, one that would open a doorway not just for Rumi, but for the world around him. And it didn't crash in. It arrived, soft, nearly invisible, but its echo would last forever. It happened when a stranger entered his life. The man's name was Shams. Some stories say they met in passing. Some say it felt like fate pulled them together. What matters is that the moment felt real, and every wall inside Rumi began to crumble in the presence of this new friend. The world, for a moment, became quiet. Rumi and Shams talked for days, sometimes with words, sometimes just in silence. They saw something unnameable in each other, a recognition deep and familiar, as if their whole lives had been leading to this meeting. The longing in Rumi, the gentle pain he'd always carried, felt answered, not by solutions, but by presence. Shams didn't solve his questions, he made them holy. Together, they let longing and wonder become a kind of shared breath. You might know the feeling, meeting someone who lets you be fully yourself, without judgment or rush. That was the turning point. Rumi found in Shams an invitation, the courage to live from his softest truth, not just as an idea, but as a way to move through each moment. Of course, their friendship shook the world around them. Others didn't always understand, but for Rumi, the shift was personal. Once you've known true presence, you can't pretend otherwise. Life is divided, before and after. The world may offer explanations, but the heart knows when a real change has happened. After Shams came, Rumi's life changed shape. He let longing become music, turned questions into poetry, started living as if every day was a new welcome. He walked slower, laughed deeper, saw familiar faces in a brand new way. The outside might have looked the same, but something essential was now quietly, fully awake. You might not remember your own turning point until after it's passed. But if you listen, you'll know the feeling, a gentle knowing that can't be forced. That, Rumi would say, is where true transformation lives. As the years settled, Rumi began to embody his truth in motion. He wasn't always writing or teaching or performing grand acts. Often it was in the small moments, the way he welcomed a stranger, or stopped to hear a bird's melody, or walked barefoot through dewy grass at dawn. He learned to rest in all things. Even on busy days, he found stillness in his movement. When he spoke, it was gentle but clear, as if every word was measured on a scale inside his chest. People started coming to him, asking questions that had no easy answers. He rarely offered advice. Instead, he listened, reflecting each person's longing back to them. His poetry grew from the same rhythm. He didn't always plan what to write. Sometimes the words arrived as naturally as breath. He trusted that whatever he carried inside was worth giving away, even if it made no sense. Every line was a hope, a secret offering, a way of opening the world a little further. In community, he was a steady presence, calm in conflict, gentle with those who struggled. He knew that everyone carried their own ache, and he moved in a way that made space for all of it. No fixing, just holding. His own pain became a bridge, so others knew they didn't walk alone. Over time, people started to say he was wise, but Rumi didn't wear wisdom as armor. He let it be soft, unfinished, always growing. Instead of controlling his days, he let them flow. The joy was in the simplicity, the taste of bread, the warmth of a friend, the golden hush before evening. If faith can be movement, Then Rumi lived in faith with every breath. He stopped separating the sacred from the ordinary. Washing his hands became a prayer. Giving water to a thirsty child became poetry. At every turn, he reminded others and himself that wholeness was always one breath away. By living like this, he didn't transcend the world. He entered it more deeply. Every moment, even the mundane, was a chance to practice presence. That was his true genius, not in the verses he wrote or the lessons he gave, but in the way he let everyday life become a sanctuary. Maybe you feel this too, the wish to let life be simpler, to move in alignment with your truth. For Rumi, embodiment meant not just saying what mattered, but letting it shape him from the inside out. A life made of breath, rhythm, and quiet, steady trust. The mastery Rumi came to was not in control. It was the gift of surrender. He allowed each experience, joy, loss, confusion, to shape him without shutting down. There was a time when all he wanted was answers, but mastery was about making peace with not knowing. Often you'd find him sitting quietly among others, not as a leader, but as a participant. He cultivated an ease with being present rather than performing. His greatest strength was in his attention. He could listen so closely that even unspoken grief had room to breathe. In the classroom, he welcomed debate and difference, letting each student walk at their own pace. Instead of demanding conformity, he celebrated every question. Mastery, for Rumi, was about welcoming chaos without losing his own center. He learned to welcome not just the beauty, but also the mess of life, the spilled wine, the tears at dusk, the uncertainty left hanging after an argument. All of it belonged. All of it taught him that peace wasn't in perfection, but in presence. He may have been called a sage, but he never saw himself above others. Rumi laughed at his own mistakes, found joy in surprises, let silence fill the spaces words failed to reach. The deepest mastery was the trust that if you stay, the wisdom will come. If you let go, the answer will find you. If you allow presence, even confusion becomes holy. Maybe you recognize this in small moments of your own, a pause, a breath, a willingness to let go of control. That is mastery in motion, the kind that grows softer, not harder, with each day you live it. Beneath all these stories, Rumi lived by hidden laws, quiet codes that shaped his steps, unspoken rules the world rarely noticed. He never named them, but those who watched closely felt them move. He trusted the invisible rhythm underneath everything. If sadness came, he let it visit. If joy arrived, he let it linger. He made space for every feeling, never trying to force a single one to stay or go. He moved in faith that what needed to arrive would arrive, and what needed to fall away would leave. Rumi believed in the wisdom of the ordinary. He knew that sometimes the greatest transformation is just saying yes to the smallest present moment. He allowed the world to shape him, but never lost his core. What looked like passivity was quiet power, the power of being deeply synchronized with life. He would rise before dawn, breathing in the world before anyone else stirred. He honored the silence before the city